Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Susan McGuire, Manager of Professional Development at ACCE, and I'm happy to welcome you to today's webinar. Today we'll hear from Amy Cortina, Senior Manager of Strategic Partnerships at the Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce. Amy will be talking today about development strategies that have been used by the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce to raise over $4 million each year to support education and workforce development initiatives. Before I turn the program over to Amy, we have a few housekeeping notes. First, attendees are in listen-only mode during the webinar to avoid background noise. Second, after Amy's presentation, we will have time for questions, which you can ask by using the question function of the webinar. The question box is on the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Just type in your question and I will read the question to Amy. If we run out of time and don't get to your question, or if you have a question that you would prefer to discuss with us individually offline, please feel free to contact Amy directly. Her contact information will be included in the presentation on the last slide. We can also get in touch with you afterwards after the webinar. And third, this webinar is being recorded and should be up on the ACCE website on the ACCE University webpage within the next 1 to 2 business days. So you can take a look for it by no later than Monday, December 19th. I will also post the presentation slides along with the webinar recording. I want to let you know that I have already uploaded the presentation slides on the GoToWebinar panel. So if you look on the lower right-hand side of the panel and click on the handout, you can download it. If that does not work for some reason, or you would rather not download the presentation during the webinar and just listen to it, that's perfectly fine. As I said, it will be posted on our webinar page along with the webinar recording. So with that, I would like to introduce our speaker today. Amy Cortina is the Senior Manager for Strategic Partnerships at the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce Foundation. Focusing her efforts on education and workforce development, Amy is responsible for aligning, cultivating, and stewarding strategic partners locally around cradle-to-career programs, policies, and systems change initiatives. Prior to working at the LA Chamber, Amy supported resource development strategies for the Advancement Department of a K-12 independent school in Washington, D.C., consulted a rural Mexican town on community development projects, coordinated Western region programs for a national nonprofit serving kids with cancer, and served as a Peace Corps rural community development volunteer. Amy received a Bachelor of Science in Journalism and Political Science from the University of Colorado, Boulder, and a Master of International Affairs from the University of California, San Diego School of Global Policy and Strategy. So thank you, Amy, so much for being here with us today, and take it away.
Great. Thank you for the intro. As Susan mentioned, I have been a fundraiser for many different types of organizations, but I have to say that raising resources at a Chamber of Commerce has been by far my most unique experience. And that's really because as a civic institution, there's so much opportunity for chambers out there. And there are also delicate waters that we have to tread. So with that, I'm just going to go over a little bit about what this presentation will address. In this webinar, we will go over some of those opportunities and limitations as you think about your 2017 fundraising plan and the strategies you'll employ to increase revenues for your different initiatives. We'll go over various development strategies that we use to raise over $4 million each year to support education and workforce development initiatives. We'll go over grant-making processes, and then we'll dive into tools for identifying, researching, and cultivating potential donors. I understand that many on this webinar are looking to develop funding for initiatives that are outside of the education and workforce development area, and that's completely fine. Yeah, you can utilize this information for any initiative, really. So let's get into it. So there are various sources of revenue that you can seek. I'm sure most of you seek out corporate sponsorships for various events. Here at the Los Angeles Chamber, sometimes what sparks a business interests in chamber membership is supporting philanthropic efforts. And our Education Workforce Development Division actually has kind of this agreement with our membership department that they, with our Diamond level club, Diamond Club members, they can donate a certain portion of their membership to some of our education workforce development initiatives. And this really keeps them happy because they want to feel like they're not just giving to membership, but they're giving to a good cause, something that they care deeply about. And it's investment in the chamber. So we're happy because that's extra money for us. The other thing is there are some corporations where they are prohibited from being able to spend money in membership. So instead, one way that they get around that is to give us donations, and then we might cut a portion of that to membership. But investment in the chamber is investment. So the other way that you can get corporate sponsorships is through sponsorships for events or reports that you plan to release. And this really gives corporations the opportunity to put their brand on a positive community effort. The next source of revenue on this list you see is fee for service. Our chamber doesn't really have a fee-for-service model. We could. We have two programs, one LA Youth at Work and another called Cash for College, where we train different organizations to implement workshops for youth in their communities. And we could charge these different organizations, but we have decided not to. Instead, we seek out grants to support those efforts. A few years ago, in collaboration with the Mayor of Los Angeles Youth Employment Campaign, we would offer businesses paid youth interns for $2,000 per youth. We acted essentially as these corporations' HRs, vetting and placing youth in their various summer intern openings. Another way that you can raise revenue is through government grants and contracts. That's actually how Unite LA, which I'll go into what Unite LA and the Chamber started off doing. We got a Los Angeles School to Work initiative, School to Work federal grant, where we were subcontracted by LAUSD in the 90s to oversee that work. The only thing I would say about seeking out revenue from government grants and contracts is that these can be tedious and very compliance driven, and it is risky if you solely rely on them because they're usually reimbursement grants, which means you don't get funds until after you've completed the work. So I would diversify your funding and not only solely rely on government grants and contracts. And that's actually one thing that we realized when we were overseeing the School to Work initiative is that we, in order to not only sustain our work but to grow our work, needed to seek out different sources of funds. So that brings us to foundation grants, and that was the easiest way for us to seek more dollars for our education workforce initiative. We get actually a majority of our revenues through private foundation grants. And again, we don't want to rely on any one source for the majority of our funding. So we are also looking at different strategies for individual giving. So individual giving, this is an area that, like I said, we could really capitalize on. At the LA Chamber, we have business executives who sit on our various boards or who are committed volunteers for our different youth programming. They see firsthand the impact our initiatives have on youth in the wider Los Angeles community. And they're more willing and wanting to give money to these initiatives because they feel that impact. Personally, we have a give or get policy for one of our boards. Now, this is where our board members are expected to either give a gift, and we haven't assigned a minimum number, although some organizations do, or they get funding for the organization from another source. So, for example, a few of our board members sit on the board of another foundation, and they will direct foundational support to our organization. And then lastly on this list, public and private partnerships. So we aren't really engaged, but one example of a public-private partnership is in Los Angeles. They just created this public-private center within the Office of Child Protection to help coordinate foster youth services. And the Chamber is well positioned to be a part of many different public-private partnerships. All right, so as a chamber, you are a 501c6, but there are many benefits for activating a 501c3. Some of you may already have foundations through which you manage charitable efforts. However, for those who don't, you might consider starting a 501c3 because there's true value in having an affiliate or a supporting organization that can help drive the mission and vision of your chamber's special initiatives. As previously mentioned, the LA Chamber's work around education and workforce development initiatives began through a sub-grant we received through the federal School to Work grant given to Los Angeles Unified School District. When that body of work evolved and those leading it wanted to sustain it, they applied for 501c3 status so they could seek out other funding and build it out further. The organization is now known as Unite LA. And initially, before Unite LA became a 501c3, Unite LA used a fiscal agent to receive funding from private foundations. However, this is more of a short-term strategy because fiscal agents will charge administrative fees and some will try and influence your funding, influence how your funding gets spent. But in 2003, Unite LA signed an MOU to become a nonprofit affiliate of the LA Chamber and oversee its educational workforce development work. And in doing so, David Rattray, who is the president of Unite LA, also became the VP of Educational Workforce Development for the LA Chamber. This partnership helped solidify the Chamber's educational workforce development initiatives, and now we have 31 people dedicated to education and workforce development at the LA Chamber. And then another thing that I should mention is that our education and workforce development team utilizes another 501c3 to raise funding. In 1970, the LA Chamber established the LA Chamber of Commerce Foundation, and it was really underutilized until David Rattray realized it could be beneficial in raising additional funding. So I wouldn't stop at just one or two 501c3s. It is beneficial to be able to operate under, multiple 501c3s. Okay, so the first bullet point a 501c3 can protect your work from your chamber's political engagement. And what I mean by that is sometimes your chamber membership strongly supports a policy or ballot measure that is at odds with what you're trying to do and with what funders in your community are trying to fund. So by having that separate 501c3 entity, we're able to avoid getting involved in certain political issues. And 501c3 can further establish your initiatives within a formal structure. So when you create a 501c3, you're able to prioritize those initiatives and allow them to grow. Externally, you are able to create a brand around that work. And then finally, with 501c3 status, you're eligible for public and private grants that some 501c6s are not. Many foundations will only donate to a 501c3. Okay. So as I mentioned before, our primary way of raising funds for educational workforce development initiatives is through private foundation grants. So this is kind of what the stage for prospecting and seeking out funding through private foundation grants looks like. This is a process that's grounded in the conviction that a partnership should develop between a nonprofit and a donor. When you spend a great deal of your time seeking money, it's hard to remember that it's also difficult to give away money. In fact, the dollars contributed by a foundation or any donor have no value until they're attached to solid programs in the nonprofit sector. And nonprofits have ideas and capacity to solve problems, but no dollars with which to implement them. Foundations and corporations have financial resources, but not necessarily the other resources needed to create and manage programs. So the result is a dynamic collaboration. So keep this in mind as you develop your fundraising portfolios. So just to go over this process, first you're going to really start researching like who is funding the type of work that you are managing or implementing or want to do. Once you've researched that, you're also going to research what not only if they're funding your sort of initiative, but what their grant-making process looks like, who is in their organization that you can reach out to, how much money they might give to your initiative or your organization. And once you've established that, you'll begin to prospect and cultivate those relationships. Later on in the webinar, I'll show you a tool that can help you manage those relationships better throughout the year. So once you've prospected and cultivated those relationships, they might invite you to submit a letter of intent or a concept paper. They might invite you to submit a full proposal. And then once this has happened, there might be back and forth, them asking you